My name is Miranda, and I just turned 31 years old. For most of my life, I believed that being the good daughter meant staying quiet, working hard, and giving everything I had to the people I loved. I thought that if I just kept showing up, kept helping, kept sacrificing, eventually my family would see my worth. On my 31st birthday, I discovered a video my father posted online where he and my entire family mocked me while strangers laughed along in the comments. What happened 2 weeks later changed everything. Before I share what happened, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If stories about finding your voice and standing up for yourself resonate with you, hit that like button and subscribe to join this community. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a small house in Pueblo, Colorado, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and family reputation matters more than individual happiness. My father, Donald, worked as a foreman at the local steel plant for nearly 3 decades before it shut down when I was in high school. He was a man built from a different era, one where sons carried the family name forward, and daughters were expected to marry well and stay close to home. He never said it outright, but I felt it in every interaction, every overlooked achievement, every conversation that centered on my 3 older brothers instead of me. My mother was the opposite. She was gentle, perceptive, and fiercely protective of my dreams, even when she had to be subtle about it. She would slip notes into my backpack, telling me she was proud of me. She would stay up late helping me with college applications, while my father watched television in the other room, uninterested in where his only daughter might end up. When she was diagnosed with breast cancer during my freshman year of college, my world cracked in half. She passed away 6 months later, right before my 20th birthday. The last thing she ever told me was this: "Live your life, Miranda. Do not let anyone define your worth." I did not fully understand those words until much later. My brothers are Kevin, Brandon, and Tyler. Kevin is the oldest, at 38. A mechanic who has never quite managed to keep a job for more than 2 years at a time. He married Denise when they were both 23, and she has spent the last 15 years competing with me in ways I never asked for. Brandon is 35, charming on the surface but perpetually between opportunities, as he likes to call his unemployment. Tyler is 33, just 2 years older than me, and the quietest of the 3. He drives trucks across the country and calls home rarely. But when family drama erupts, he always seems to side with whatever opinion requires the least confrontation. Growing up as the only girl among 3 boys meant I was either invisible or a target. When Kevin won a wrestling match in high school, my father threw a party and invited half the neighborhood. When I received a full academic scholarship to the University of Colorado, Denver, my father asked who would stay home to take care of my mother during her treatments. I remember standing in the kitchen holding that acceptance letter, feeling like I had won the lottery and lost it all in the same breath. My mother intervened. She told my father that I deserved this chance, that she would be fine, that they would figure out her care together. He relented, but he never congratulated me. College was a blur of double shifts at a campus coffee shop, late-night studying, and the constant awareness that I had no safety net. When my mother died, I came home for 2 weeks and then went right back because I could not afford to fall behind. My brothers expected me to drop out and take over household duties. My father expected me to grieve quietly and return to my place in the family hierarchy. Instead, I graduated with honors, landed an internship at a financial consulting firm in Denver, and worked my way up to a junior analyst position within 3 years. By the time I was 27, I was earning more than anyone in my family had ever earned. I sent money home every month without being asked. I paid off my father's property taxes when he fell behind. I covered Kevin's credit card debt twice when Denise called me crying about collectors. I loaned Brandon $12,000 to start a food truck business that failed within 6 months. I helped Tyler put a down payment on his first truck so he could become an independent contractor. I did all of this quietly, without expectation of gratitude, because I thought that was what family meant. But here's what I did not realize. Every dollar I sent home reinforced their belief that my money was their entitlement. Every time I said yes without hesitation, I taught them that my boundaries did not exist. And every time I came home for holidays only to be teased about my single status, my childless life, my workaholic tendencies, I smiled and swallowed my hurt because I thought love required sacrifice. At family gatherings, the conversation always circled back to the same jokes. When is Miranda getting married? Does Miranda even date? Maybe if she spent less time with spreadsheets and more time with actual men, she would not be alone. Kevin would laugh and slap the table. Denise would smirk and exchange glances with my aunts. Brandon would shake his head like my life was a cautionary tale. Tyler would stay quiet, neither defending me nor joining in, which somehow felt worse. And my father, the man who was supposed to protect me, would lead the chorus with his booming voice and dismissive wave. That is just Miranda. She thinks she is too good for a regular life. I told myself they did not mean it. I told myself this was just how families communicated, through teasing and ribbing and uncomfortable laughter. I told myself that love and disrespect could somehow coexist. I was wrong. The morning of my 31st birthday arrived like any other Thursday. I woke up early, made coffee, answered a few work emails, and scrolled through birthday messages from colleagues and college friends. By noon, I had received exactly 0 messages from my family. No call from my father, no text from Kevin or Brandon, nothing from Tyler, though I half expected that, since he was probably on a long haul somewhere in Wyoming. Even Denise, who had my number saved and occasionally reached out when she needed something, did not bother to send a generic happy birthday emoji. I told myself it did not matter. I was 31, not 13. I did not need a parade or a cake or a chorus of well wishes from people who had spent years making me feel small. I ordered Thai food for dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and queued up a movie I had been wanting to watch for months. This was going to be a peaceful evening, a celebration of myself by myself. Then my phone rang. It was Harper, my best friend since freshman orientation, the only person outside of work who truly understood my family dynamics. Her voice was strange when I answered, tight and hesitant, like she was choosing her words carefully. "Miranda," she said, "have you been on Facebook today?" I told her no. I had taken a break from social media months ago, after realizing that seeing my family's curated posts only made me feel worse about our actual relationships. Harper paused, and in that pause, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "I think you need to see something," she said. "I'm sending you a link right now. Just promise me you will call me back after you watch it." The link led to my father's Facebook page. The video had been posted 4 days earlier, which meant it was filmed the previous weekend, during a family gathering I had not been invited to attend. The thumbnail showed my father sitting in his recliner, the same one he had owned for 15 years, surrounded by my brothers and their wives and a few aunts and uncles I recognized from childhood. Everyone was laughing. The video was 3 minutes and 42 seconds long. I pressed play. My father was in the middle of a story, gesturing with his hands the way he always did when he had an audience. The camera was shaky, probably held by one of my cousins. I could hear Kevin's voice off screen, encouraging my father to keep going. "So there is Miranda," my father said, his voice loud and amused. 31 years old and still no husband, no kids, nothing but that fancy job she is always talking about. You know what I think? I think she is going to die alone in that apartment of hers, surrounded by spreadsheets and takeout containers. The room erupted in laughter. I watched my brothers double over. I watched Denise clap her hands together like this was the funniest thing she had ever heard. I watched my Aunt Patricia nod along with a knowing smile. Kevin leaned into the frame. "She makes all this money and cannot even get a date." Maybe she should pay someone to pretend to like her. More laughter. Brandon chimed in next. She thinks she is better than all of us. Too good for Pueblo. Too good for a normal life. But look at her. Alone on every holiday. Alone on every birthday. That is not success. That is sad. The camera panned back to my father, who was wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. She is my daughter, he said, and I love her. But sometimes, I wonder where I went wrong. Your mother, God rest her soul, she always said Miranda was special. But special does not keep you warm at night, does it? The video ended with everyone raising their glasses in a mock toast. To Miranda, someone said, may she find someone as patient as her spreadsheets. I sat frozen on my couch, the video playing on loop because I had forgotten to pause it. The Thai food grew cold on the coffee table. The wine sat untouched. I could not move. I could not breathe. I could not reconcile the faces of the people I had loved my entire life with the cruelty I had just witnessed. Then I made the mistake of scrolling down to the comments. The video had over 200 views and 63 comments. Most were from relatives and family friends, people who had watched me grow up, people I had exchanged Christmas cards with, people who had eaten at my mother's table and told me I was a good girl for helping with the dishes. Their words blurred together. Poor Donald, having a daughter like that. She was always too serious, even as a kid. No wonder she is single. Career women never know how to keep a man. Maybe she will figure it out before it is too late. I always knew she thought she was better than us. My father had not just watched these comments accumulate, he had responded to them. Laughing emojis, thumbs up, heart reactions. A few replies thanking people for understanding his frustration. I called my father that night, hands shaking as I dialed. He answered on the third ring, his voice casual, unbothered. Hey Miranda, what is going on? I asked him about the video. I asked him why he would post something like that publicly. I asked him if he understood how humiliating it was to see my own family mocking me for strangers to enjoy. His response broke something inside me. Come on, Miranda. It was just a joke. You know how family is. We tease each other. That is what we do. Besides, maybe if you were not so sensitive, you would have been there to defend yourself. You cannot expect us to walk on eggshells just because you have thin skin. I told him it was my birthday. I told him that instead of calling to wish me well, he had spent the day laughing at my expense with people who were supposed to love me. He sighed like I was being dramatic. Birthdays are for kids. You are 31. Grow up. And honestly, Miranda, maybe you deserve a little teasing. You act like you are above us all the time. Coming home with your fancy clothes and your big job and never staying long enough to actually be part of this family. What did you expect? I hung up without saying goodbye. Then I sat in the dark and cried for the first time in years. Not because of what they said, but because I finally understood that I had been pouring love into people who saw me as nothing more than a punchline and a paycheck. The days following my birthday felt like moving through fog. I went to work, sat in meetings, answered emails, but my mind kept replaying that video, kept scrolling through those comments, kept hearing my father's dismissive voice telling me I deserved it. Harper checked in every few hours, texting words of encouragement and offering to drive up from Fort Collins for the weekend. I told her I was fine. I was not fine. But I did not know how to explain the particular pain of being betrayed by the people who were supposed to be your foundation. The video stayed up. Every day it accumulated more views, more comments, more laughing reactions from people I had known my entire life. My father did not delete it. My brothers did not ask him to take it down. Denise shared it to her own page with the caption, "Family time with the in-laws." No wonder Miranda never shows up. She cannot handle the truth. A week after my birthday, Kevin called. I almost did not answer, but some part of me hoped he was reaching out to apologize, to acknowledge that things had gone too far. Instead, he asked me for $5,000. "Miranda, I need a favor," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone he always used when he wanted something. "The transmission on my truck is shot. I cannot work without it. Denise is already on my case about bills. You know I am good for it." I asked him if he had seen the video our father posted. He laughed. "That? Come on, that was just Dad being Dad. You know how he is. Do not tell me you are still upset about that." I told him I was not giving him money. Not now. Maybe not ever again. His tone shifted immediately from friendly to aggressive. "What do you mean, not ever again? You have money. I need money. That is how this works. You are family. You do not get to just cut us off because your feelings got hurt over some stupid joke." I hung up. An hour later, Brandon sent me a text asking when I was going to wire his monthly support. He called it support, like it was an obligation, like I owed him something for simply existing. When I did not respond, he sent another message. "Earth to Miranda, did you forget about me? I have rent due next week." Then another. "You are not seriously still mad about that video, are you? Grow up." Then another. "This is why nobody wants to date you. You are impossible." I blocked his number. Tyler did not reach out directly, but I knew he was aware of what was happening. He had been in that room when the video was filmed. He had laughed along with everyone else. His silence was its own kind of betrayal, the passivity of someone who would rather belong to the group than stand up for what was right. A week and a half after my birthday, I called my father one more time. I wanted to give him a chance to make this right, to acknowledge the pain he had caused, to show me that somewhere, underneath the bravado and the favoritism, he still cared about his only daughter. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I need to talk to you about something important." He sighed, already sounding annoyed. "If this is about that video again, I do not want to hear it. I already told you, it was a joke. You need to let it go." I did not let it go. Instead, I asked him a question I had never asked before. "Do you know how much money I have given this family over the last 10 years? He was quiet for a moment. "What does that have to do with anything?" I told him. I listed every payment, every loan, every bailout, the property taxes, Kevin's credit card debt, Brandon's failed business, Tyler's truck, the emergency repairs, the medical bills I covered when Aunt Patricia had her surgery and no one else stepped up. I had kept records because my job taught me to document everything. The total was over $90,000. My father's response was a scoff. "So what? You have money. We needed help. That is what family does. You do not get to throw that in our faces like you are some kind of martyr." I asked him if he remembered the last time anyone in the family said thank you. He could not answer because the answer was never. Then I asked him if he remembered the last time anyone called me on my birthday. He could not answer that either. I told him I was done. Not done with loving him, not done with the possibility of reconciliation, but done with being the family ATM while being treated as the family joke. I told him I needed time, I needed space, and I needed to figure out what a healthy relationship with my family could actually look like. Until then, there would be no more money, no more emergency rescues, no more showing up just to be torn down. He exploded. "Who do you think you are? You think you can just abandon your family because we hurt your precious feelings? Your mother would be ashamed of you. She raised you better than this." I almost broke at that. Using my mother against me was his most effective weapon, and he knew it. But something had shifted inside me. I remembered her words, the ones she spoke when she was too weak to lift her head from the pillow, but strong enough to look me in the eyes and tell me the truth. "Live your life, Miranda. Do not let anyone define your worth." I told my father that Mom would have understood. Then I told him I would be waiting for his apology whenever he was ready to offer one. I hung up and turned off my phone. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the family group chat, and typed a message. "I love all of you. but I cannot continue being disrespected while also being expected to financially support this family. Until things change, I am stepping back. Please do not contact me about money. Please do not contact me to tell me I am overreacting. When you are ready to treat me as an equal member of this family instead of a punchline or a bank account, I will be here. But until then, I need distance. I pressed send, watched the delivery confirmation appear next to each name, and then left the group. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept through until morning. The response to my message was immediate and explosive. Even though I had left the group chat, the individual texts and voicemails piled up like debris after a storm. Kevin called me selfish and ungrateful. Denise sent a paragraph about how I was tearing the family apart over nothing. Brandon accused me of trying to manipulate everyone with my dramatic exit. My father sent a single sentence: "You will regret this." I blocked them all except Tyler. He had not reached out to attack me, and some part of me wondered if his silence meant something different than I had assumed. Maybe he was processing. Maybe he was waiting for the chaos to settle before speaking his mind. Maybe I was just hoping for one person in my family to prove me wrong about them. The first few days after cutting contact were disorienting. My phone, which had always been a source of anxiety with its constant notifications and requests, suddenly went silent. The quiet felt strange, almost unnatural, like the aftermath of a power outage when you realize how much noise you had grown accustomed to. I filled the silence with work, with therapy appointments I scheduled on Harper's recommendation, with long walks through City Park where I could think without interruption. My therapist's name was Dr. Elaine, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a calm voice that made me feel like I could say anything without judgment. In our first session, I told her the entire story, from my childhood in Pueblo to the video to my decision to step back. She listened without interrupting, then asked me a question that stayed with me for days. "What would it look like," she asked, "if you treated yourself with the same generosity you have shown your family?" I did not have an answer. For so long, my generosity had flowed outward, toward people who took without giving, who demanded without appreciating, who loved me only when I was useful. The idea of directing that care inward felt foreign, almost selfish. Dr. Elaine told me that relearning self-worth after a lifetime of being undervalued would take time. She was right. In the meantime, I started making small changes. I used the money I would have sent to my family to pay off my own credit card completely. I booked a weekend trip to Santa Fe, something I had wanted to do for years, but always postponed because there was always someone else who needed help. I signed up for the CFA Level 3 exam, a professional certification that would open doors to senior positions at my firm. I bought new furniture for my apartment, pieces I actually loved, instead of the functional hand-me-downs I had accumulated over years of putting everyone else first. Harper drove up from Fort Collins 2 weeks after my birthday. We spent the entire Saturday talking, crying, and eventually laughing about the absurdity of my family's behavior. She told me she was proud of me for setting boundaries. She told me that walking away from toxicity was not abandonment, but survival. She reminded me that my mother would have supported this decision, that the love she showed me was the kind that wanted me to thrive, not the kind that demanded I sacrifice myself on the altar of family obligation. While we were having dinner at a restaurant downtown, my phone buzzed. It was Tyler, the first message I had received from anyone in my family since blocking the others. His text was simple. "Hey Miranda, I know things are bad right now. I am not texting to ask for anything or to yell at you. I just wanted you to know. I am sorry I did not stand up for you. That video was wrong. I should have said something. I hope you are okay." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Harper watched me, waiting to see what I would do. Finally, I typed back. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know. I need time, but I appreciate you reaching out." He sent a thumbs up emoji, and that was the end of the conversation for now. But something had shifted. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, someone in my family had acknowledged that I had been wronged. It was a small acknowledgement, quiet and imperfect, but it was something. What I did not know then was that the real test was still coming. Because while I was rebuilding my sense of self-worth, my family was about to discover just how much they had taken for granted. Exactly 2 weeks after I left the family group chat, my phone started ringing. I had unblocked my family members the night before, partly out of curiosity, and partly because Dr. Elaine suggested it might be useful to see where they were in their processing. She warned me that they might not have changed at all, that they might continue with the same patterns that had pushed me away. But she also pointed out that avoiding them forever was not sustainable if I ever wanted a chance at reconciliation on my own terms. The first call came at 7:30 in the morning from a number I did not recognize. I ignored it. Then came a text from that same number. "Miranda, this is Kevin. I lost my phone and I am calling from Denise's mom's house. Please pick up. It is urgent." I did not pick up. Over the next hour, my phone rang 11 more times. Kevin, Brandon, Denise, even a number from Pueblo that I recognized as my father's landline. The voicemails piled up, each one more frantic than the last. "Miranda, this is Kevin. I do not know what you are doing, but I need you to call me back right now. The bank is threatening to sue me. This is serious. Miranda, it is Brandon. I got evicted. I am sitting in my car with all my stuff. I do not know what to do. Please call me. Miranda, this is your father. We need to talk. Things have gotten out of hand here. Just call me." "Miranda, it is Denise. I know we have not always been close, but Kevin is falling apart, and I do not know who else to call. Please help us." I listened to each voicemail twice, cataloging the desperation in their voices, noting the absence of any actual apology or acknowledgement of why I had stepped back in the first place. They were not calling because they missed me. They were not calling because they realized they had been wrong. They were calling because the money had stopped. And suddenly, all the problems they had been hiding behind my generosity were exposed. Harper texted me around noon, checking in as she always did. I told her about the calls. She asked me what I was going to do. I told her I did not know yet. That afternoon, Tyler called. His voice was different from the others, calmer, without the edge of panic. "Hey," he said. "I know you are probably getting bombarded right now. I just wanted to give you a heads up about what is going on." He told me everything. Kevin's transmission had failed completely, and without a working vehicle, he had lost multiple clients. His credit card debt, which I had paid off twice before, had ballooned back up because he never actually changed his spending habits. The bank was now threatening legal action, and Denise was talking about leaving him. Brandon had been evicted from his apartment after missing 2 months of rent. He was sleeping in his car and had burned through his savings trying to restart yet another failed business venture. He had called Tyler asking for a place to stay, but Tyler was on the road and could not help. My father's water heater had broken, leaving him without hot water in the middle of February. He could not afford a replacement, and the local plumber he had used for years refused to do the work on credit because my father still owed him from a repair 3 years ago. I asked Tyler why he was telling me all this. His answer surprised me. "Because I think they needed to learn this lesson," he said. "You are not a piggy bank, Miranda. You are a person. And they treated you like an ATM for so long that they forgot you were also their sister and their daughter. I am not calling to ask you to fix any of this. I am just calling to say that whatever you decide to do, I am on your side." I thanked him. Then I asked him why he had not said any of this sooner, why he had stayed silent for all those years while the rest of the family diminished me. He was quiet for a moment before answering. I was a coward, he admitted. It was easier to go along with them than to stand up and risk becoming the next target. That was wrong, and I am sorry. I cannot change the past, but I can try to be better going forward. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment watching the snow fall outside my window. My phone continued to buzz with calls and texts from Kevin, Brandon, and my father. Each message was more desperate than the last, but none of them contained the words I needed to hear. I thought about what Dr. Elaine had told me about boundaries. They are not walls, she explained. They are not meant to keep people out forever. They are meant to protect you while you heal, and to teach others how you need to be treated. If they can learn to respect your boundaries, there is a chance for repair. If they cannot, that tells you everything you need to know about the relationship. That night, I made a decision. I would respond to my father, but on my terms and in my own time. I would not rush back into the role they expected me to play. I would not write a check to make their problems disappear. I would not pretend that the last 2 weeks had not happened. But I would leave the door open, just a crack, to see if any of them were capable of walking through it as changed people. 3 days after the flood of phone calls began, I responded to my father with a letter. Not a text, not a phone call, but an actual letter, handwritten on paper I bought specifically for this purpose. Writing by hand felt important, like I was taking the time to be deliberate with every word. I told him everything. I wrote about my childhood, about feeling invisible, about working twice as hard as my brothers for half the recognition. I wrote about Mom, about how her faith in me was the only thing that kept me going during the darkest years. I wrote about the money I had given to the family, not to throw it in his face, but to illustrate a pattern he seemed incapable of seeing. I gave endlessly, and they took without gratitude. I wrote about the video. I described how it felt to watch my own father mock me in front of relatives and strangers. I described the humiliation of reading those comments, of seeing him respond with laughing emojis, of being told I deserved it when I asked for an explanation. I wrote about what I needed, not money back, not apologies that were forced, not sudden declarations of love that felt performative. I needed acknowledgement. I needed him to understand that the way he had treated me was wrong, that it had caused real harm, and that repairing our relationship would require genuine effort. I ended the letter by telling him I loved him. I told him that I wanted to have a relationship with my father, but not at the cost of my self-worth. I told him the door was open whenever he was ready to walk through it, as the father I deserved, not the one I had learned to expect. I mailed the letter on a Tuesday and spent the rest of the week waiting. Harper kept me company through text. Tyler sent occasional updates about the family situation, careful not to pressure me in either direction. Dr. Elaine reminded me that I could not control how my father responded, only how I processed his response. The following Sunday, my father called. His voice was different than I had ever heard it, quieter, almost uncertain. "I got your letter," he said. "I read it 4 times. I waited for him to continue. He asked if I could come home, not to fix anything, not to write checks, but to talk. Just the 2 of them, no brothers, no wives, no audience. He said he had things he needed to say in person. I agreed to come, but I set conditions. The video had to be deleted before I arrived. He had to post something acknowledging that it was hurtful and that he regretted it. And the conversation had to be between us, without interruption, without anyone else's opinions weighing in. He hesitated, but agreed. I drove to Pueblo the following Saturday. The house looked exactly the same faded siding, the same overgrown lawn, the same recliner visible through the front window. But something felt different as I walked up the path. Maybe it was me. My father opened the door before I could knock. He looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow, like the weight of the last few weeks had compressed him. He did not hug me, but he stepped aside to let me in, and that felt like progress. We sat in the living room, the same room where the video had been filmed. I noticed the camera was gone. The video was gone. In its place was an awkward silence that stretched between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. Finally, he spoke. "I did not realize," he said slowly, "how much I had been hurting you. I grew up thinking daughters were supposed to be quiet and supportive. I never saw that as disrespect. I saw it as just how things were. But reading your letter, hearing about all the times I overlooked you, all the money you gave without being asked, I started to see things differently." He paused, struggling with his next words. "The video was wrong. I knew it was wrong even while we were filming it, but everyone was laughing, and it felt harmless. It did not feel harmless to you, and I should have known better. I am sorry, Miranda. I am sorry for the video. I am sorry for the comments. I am sorry for telling you that you deserved it when you called. That was cruel, and you did not deserve any of it. I had waited years to hear my father say he was sorry. Now that he was saying it, I did not know how to feel. Part of me wanted to collapse into forgiveness, to pretend everything could go back to normal. Another part of me, the part Dr. Elaine had helped me strengthen, knew that words were just the beginning. I told him I accepted his apology. I told him I appreciated that he was trying. But I also told him that trust would take time to rebuild. I would not go back to sending money every month. I would not bail out Kevin or Brandon or anyone else who refused to change their own patterns. I would visit when I could, call when I wanted to, and show up for genuine family moments. But the dynamic of the past decade, where I was the invisible bank account, that was over. My father nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "I do not like it, but I understand." Then he said something that surprised me. "Your mother was right about you," he said. "She always knew you were special. I was too stubborn to see it, but I see it now." I cried then, for the first time since this whole journey began, not tears of pain, but tears of release. My father and I did not hug. We were not there yet. But we had built a small foundation, fragile and new, that might someday hold the weight of a real relationship. 6 months have passed since that conversation in my father's living room. The road to healing has not been linear. There have been setbacks, moments when old patterns tried to resurface, when Kevin sent a passive-aggressive text about needing help, or when Brandon made a snide comment about my priorities. But I have learned to hold my boundaries without guilt. I have learned that loving my family does not require sacrificing myself. My relationship with my father has improved in small, meaningful ways. He calls me on my birthday now. He asks about my job and actually listens to the answer. He has stopped making jokes about my single status, and when relatives bring it up at family gatherings, he changes the subject. He is not perfect. He still stumbles, but he is trying, and that effort means more to me than any grand gesture ever could. Kevin and Brandon remain at a distance. They have not truly changed, and I have accepted that they might never change. But I no longer carry the weight of their expectations. I respond to their texts when I feel like it, and ignore them when I do not. I have learned that being related to someone does not obligate me to tolerate their disrespect. Tyler has become the brother I always needed. We talk every few weeks, sometimes for hours, about everything and nothing. He has apologized multiple times for his silence during those difficult years. I have forgiven him, not because he earned it through grand gestures, but because his remorse is genuine and his behavior has changed. My career has flourished. I passed the CFA exam and was promoted to senior analyst. I am saving for a down payment on a condo, something I never thought I would prioritize while my family's needs consumed my resources. For the first time, I am investing in my own future instead of subsidizing the present of people who never appreciated it. I started dating again. His name is Marcus, an environmental engineer I met at a conference in Aspen. He is kind, patient, and genuinely curious about who I am beyond my job title or relationship status. He has met my father exactly once, and my father behaved himself. Probably because I warned him beforehand that any jokes at my expense would end the visit immediately. It is early, but it feels different from my past relationships. It feels healthy. Dr. Elaine still sees me every other week. We have moved past crisis management into something deeper, unpacking the childhood wounds that made me so eager to give and so reluctant to receive. She tells me that healing is not about forgetting what happened, but about integrating it into a new understanding of who I am. I am starting to believe her. If you are listening to this story and you see yourself in any part of it, I want you to know something. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Loving your family does not mean accepting their cruelty. Setting boundaries is not abandonment. And sometimes, the people who need to hear no the most are the people closest to us. My mother told me to live my life and not let anyone define my worth. It took me 31 years to truly understand what she meant. She was not telling me to be selfish or to cut people off at the first sign of conflict. She was telling me that my value does not depend on how useful I am to others. She was telling me that I deserve respect, not because of what I provide, but because of who I am. I am Miranda. I am 31 years old. I am a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a professional. I am also a woman who finally learned that the most important relationship I will ever have is the one with myself. If my story resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members you love? How did you find the courage to put yourself first? Share your experiences below because we are all learning from each other. If this video helped you feel less alone in your own struggles, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss future stories about resilience, healing, and finding your voice. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I hope you leave this story feeling a little lighter, a little braver, and a little more certain that you deserve to be treated with respect. Take care of yourselves, and remember that it is never too late to rewrite your own story.